go ahead and have some dessert, because I know you're going to need sugar, because it's the afternoon, after lunch, sleepy time. Maybe you've seen the movie where there's a cop, a car thief, and the thief's crazy lover. In my movie, the cop's in the thief's living room questioning the thief about some missing cars. Thief is desperately trying not to answer those questions, and the lover's in the kitchen hiding the plans for the next heist. The cop just wants to establish order. Thief wants his next heist, and the crazy lover just wants the thief to buy them a mansion in the Bahamas. Suddenly, a Russian tank crashes through the living room wall. This changes everything. Each of their individual plans are out the window. Now, they all have the same goal: survive the tank. The only way to do it is to work together. Now, this is either the plot to the next Fast and the Furious movie, or an analogy to how teams are formed. When it becomes a movie, you heard it here first, I get the royalties. If this is like most of the engineering teams I've worked on, we, the engineers, are the car thieves. Highly skilled, determined, trying to get things done, and known to disregard the rules. The cop is played by management, trying to keep everything in check. And the lover with the unrealistic expectations, that's the sales team. Though I've never battled a Russian tank in all my years of engineering, which I hadn't, I've been on plenty of teams that were thrown together to accomplish a project, thrown together without any thought or reason on how the team would operate. And when the project was over, successful or not, we were just happy to survive. We survived the project, survived the proverbial Russian tank. What if we want something more? What if survival wasn't enough? What if we not just survived, but succeeded? First pass success. Just imagine, engineers are happy. We're home for dinner. Management's happy, like Eric. Less paperwork and chaos. Salespeople are happy. Okay, I'm maybe lying there. But salespeople are happy. They have stuff for them to sell. Unfortunately, this nirvana rarely happens. Too many of our projects are like that living room after the tank rolled through it. I was on a project a few years back with some very skilled engineers and me. Each of us a lone wolf, accomplishing our tasks our way. That said, there was one guy, he was such a lone wolf, he made the rest of us look like a boy band. I imagine our name would be Backstreet Cubs, and our album, Engineers Want It That Way. Anyways, he was a great engineer. He'd take his task, go into his cave, and sometime later he'd be finished. He'd come out of his cave, give me his code, and ask for the next task. His code was well written, and it was done on time. The challenge came when we needed to integrate it. It wouldn't harmonize with the rest of the team's deliverables. Part of that was on me. I was the lead. It was my responsibility to better define how things worked. But when I asked him to help us out, he said, "Not my problem." As engineers, we are used to being assigned a task. And when we're done, we're ready for another. Like the car thief, we steal the Ford Focus and are ready for our next heist. Hopefully something more interesting than a Ford Focus, a Lexus or a Tesla perhaps. And like that thief, many of us prefer to work alone, focusing on the task at hand and neglecting other members of the team. And when we do pay attention to people, we tend to look at them as functions: cops, car thieves, crazy lovers. Each person defined by their skill, what they bring to the table, how they help us out. The challenge is that most of our projects are too complex, or like that tank. True, we need each person's skills, but we also need a team. In 2005, I became the verification lead at Lockheed Martin. One of the first things I did was change how the team operated. Originally, everyone had ownership of their own piece with no focus on the broader project. I changed that. No one owned a specific piece. We all owned the whole thing. Engineers and management balked at this idea. Engineers worried about not getting credit. Management worried without ownership, it'd be difficult to level blame and dock performance ratings. I assured them by saying, if we fail, it's my fault. My fault. But if we succeed, it's the team's success. That won over the engineers, mostly. And with them on board, management reluctantly agreed. You see, Lockheed was new to modern verification techniques, and there's risk in trying something new. But that didn't stop my manager from reminding me of his skepticism on a regular basis. After a while, people were communicating better, helping each other out, sharing ideas. The project was moving along faster because bugs were getting closed quicker. After 6 months, my manager came to me and realized group ownership was working. That project ended up being both on time and on budget. So how did we do it? Was it because we had visibility into the broader picture? Was it simple patriotic duty to help our military? Was it because we were operating as a high-functioning team? Yes. If we want to accomplish first-pass success, we need to remember the team is greater than the sum of its parts. The cop has a certain set of skills. Calm under pressure, radio for backup, knows firearms. Our thief skills, hot wire a car, drive anything including a Russian tank, and knows the back streets. Now being crazy is a skill set all its own. A favorite author of mine, Cameron Jace, once said, "Only the insane go the distance." Insanity isn't always a curse. For those that know how to use it, it's bliss. Crazy is where some of the ideas can come from. The lover's not going to stand idly by and let the thief get hurt. Maybe grabbing a jar of peanut butter and shoving it into the turret of the tank, or taking a fire extinguisher to the treads to create a smoke screen. Or creating a Molotov cocktail out of a bottle of vodka, climbing up the tank, opening the hatch and throwing it in. But together, those three can do more. They can accomplish the impossible. Imagine this. The lover distracts the tank. I am not that crazy. I have no idea how they do that. The cop and the thief climb up the tank. The cop sprays mace in the cockpit, disabling the operators, and the thief steals the tank. They not only survive the Russian tank, but neutralize it well. That's their first pass success, and we want it too. If we need a team to tackle most of the projects we've got, how do we build an effective one? It's a question that's plagued engineering companies for years. Fortunately for us, Google attempted to answer the question, how to build a great team. They called it Project Aristotle. Google analyzed 180 teams over 2 years to figure out what made their best teams tick. What Google found was 5 key traits that make up a great team. Impact, meaning, structure and clarity, dependability, psychological safety. Impact. The work matters. Meaning, the work is personally important to each team member. Structure and clarity. Team members had clear roles, plans, and goals. Dependability. Team members performed with excellence and delivered on time. That leaves the fifth and most important trait, according to Google's analytics: psychological safety. And don't worry, I had to look that term up too, because it made no sense to me. Psychological safety means team members felt secure to take risks and speak their mind. The team was built on trust and empathy. Take a look at the cop, thief, and lover. There's neither trust nor empathy between the cop, thief, or lover. They weren't on the same team. They didn't have a project. Boom, the take arrives. The problem of the take forced them to reconsider their relationship to each other. If they can find some trust, develop some empathy, a miracle can happen. That's true for them and all teams. So let me share when I personally blew trust and empathy. In 2010, I was still the verification lead at Lockheed Martin. Lockheed announced that they'd be closing our facility in Minnesota. On the plus side, they gave us 3 years. One engineer, let's call him Frank. Hopefully there's no Franks in the audience. Let's call him Frank. Didn't take the news well. He found solace in using dark humor. I'm not kidding you when he would say this: "They can take my job, but they cannot take my saved vacation." It's funny, I laughed a lot. The problem was his comments made other team members uncomfortable. I was the lead. I told him to stop it. What I failed to do was put myself in his shoes. So for several months, the comments continued. I was frustrated. After calming down another team member, I did something that I regret to this day. I vented to management instead of talking to Frank. What I said was used as justification to give Frank a lower performance rating, and he was forced to take a communications course. He felt angry and blindsided by management. I fessed up to my part in it. I apologized and admitted that I never considered Frank's feelings when I spoke to management. It was unfair of me. I broke his trust. So if trust is so important to psychological safety, how do you develop it? It's not something you can demand. Trust is earned, trust is built, and as I found out, trust is fragile. And the team is going to need trust to succeed. Luckily, since you're on the same project, you likely have similar goals. Some of the pieces of trust come pre-installed, like the idea you're not going to hurt one another. Since you're on the same project, you're likely going in the same direction. But you're going to need to build another layer of trust. That creates flow, where you effortlessly know each other's moves, how you communicate. You understand each person's strengths and weaknesses to give and receive support. But trust is only part of the definition of psychological safety. You need empathy as well. Author Brene Brown, an expert on vulnerability and empathy, has this definition for it. Empathy is communicating that incredibly healing message of, you're not alone. When someone's behind on a project, visit them at their desk, listen to their struggles, share that you've been there, because most of us have been behind on a project before. And if you can help, help. Don't just walk past their cube or comment on their struggles or offer to buy them a donut. Seems to be popular. That doesn't help them, that doesn't help the team. Empathy is hard because it requires us to be vulnerable. Empathy is hard because it means we're emotionally naked. And that's scary. Sometimes We have to admit we screwed up. But what we really want is to look good. Sometimes we have to ask for help, but we don't want to look stupid. That can make us feel isolated. Empathy brings us together. It creates an atmosphere to learn from one another. So what have I learned? In the case of Frank, I learned to put the trust of the team forefront and have empathy. Fortunately, I had a chance to make it right with Frank personally. When he chose to leave Lockheed, I helped him negotiate the salary at his new place. When you practice trust and empathy, it makes it easier to listen, easier to appreciate another person's ideas, easier to get the project to where you want it to go. Author Stephen Covey says, "Seek first to understand, then be understood." This is one of Covey's 7 habits of highly effective people. It's saying listen, but listen with trust and empathy. Unfortunately, when the stakes get high, we usually do the opposite. We say, if only they understood me. We make it about us instead of that. And what we need to do is put ourselves in their shoes. This will help both our personal and professional lives. Turns out, listening is one of those harder skills to master. It's not waiting for your turn to talk. It's not trying to figure out what you're going to say while they're talking at you. It's not thinking of that cool system Verilog concept when someone's spending time with you. It's being present in the moment. It's using body language, gestures, and verbal cues to show you're engaged. One of the killer apps, or a couple killer apps I've learned, repeat or ask clarifying questions about what you just heard. Or take notes. Now, fair warning, taking notes, not a good idea for a date. I made that mistake. The trickiest part about listening is doing so without judgment. I got into engineering because I like to solve problems. Many of you probably did too. So when someone would describe a problem to me, I would try to fix it before they even finished describing the problem. That isn't listening. Have you ever been in a meeting where someone kept trying to talk over you? How'd you feel? They were just trying to make a point, trying to win. How did that make you feel? Did you want to keep talking or just give up? What were your thoughts on that person? Have you been that person? That isn't teamwork, it isn't productive, and it's not creating an atmosphere of trust and empathy where people feel the need to share their ideas. Another secret I recently came to understand, listening doesn't mean you agree. It's trying to understand another's idea. When you prejudge the idea, you turn off listening. This is so important. I'm going to say it again. Listening doesn't mean you agree. It's attempting to hear another's idea. When you practice listening, it makes your relationships better and your team stronger. Shouldn't we all want to be a part of the strongest possible team? In your next meeting, practice listening without agenda, judgment, or response. Use listening to help your team and encourage your team to feel psychologically safe. Use listening towards your team's first pass success. So let's return to the movie. There's a cop, a car thief, and the thief's crazy lover. They each had their own goals. Then the tank arrives. Through trust, empathy, and listening, they can do more than just survive a Russian tank. they can neutralize it. That's their first path to success, and we want it too.